Conservative MP Kevin Hollinrake. A very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Oh, sounds like you've got the cough as well. Let's do it.
Okay, I've got as you, I don't
think. There's lots I want to talk to you about, and including, obviously, your brief in housing's very much been in the news. But can I just start with this Chinese spy, H6, that's all we're only allowed to know him as, an alleged Chinese spy, banned, from entering the country, thrown out. The rest of the world knows his name. We're not allowed to know his name because of a court order today, which we think is going to be undermined today by either Nigel Farage or Richard Tice of Reform UK, naming him using the parliamentary privilege. But we've had Prince Andrew, close contacts with this guy, close confidant, he's been described as, and yet, Prince Andrew, obviously, he's got some question marks over his perhaps judgment of who would be a good close confidant and who wouldn't. But how damaging and how worrying do you think this spy scandal is?
Well, it's a real concern because it wasn't just an informal chat. I don't think they had. This is an ongoing relationship, and clearly Prince Andrew has a very senior role to play in our country, of course, and. We know the Chinese have form at this, in terms of trying to infiltrate various different parts of our society, be it politics or business or whatever else. And we know they can be a nefarious influence at times. So it's very important. I can't understand, actually, why he was advised not why he wasn't advised to sever this relationship or not let it develop.
Well, he was also advised to sever Jeffrey Epstein's, but maybe he couldn't get the Chinese spy to lend him a house for him to come and stay in, so he could say, I want to sever my relationship.
Strange, very strange. He must have been advised not to have that relationship, and yet did it anyway. So it needs a proper investigation. We don't know the detailed facts yet. We should find out exactly what's happened before we make a final judgment on this. But it looks very serious to me.
But your government was, you were part of a Conservative government for years. David Cameron, there's a picture of David Cameron and Theresa May both with this Chinese spy. We don't know how, whether they had anything other than a glad hand, a function, and it doesn't mean nothing more serious than that. But we know, your government was quite happy to, give the 5G contract to Huawei, a Chinese firm that is completely beholden to the Chinese state. So many governments in recent years, Tory and Labour alike, have been happy to sell Britain to the Chinese, fully knowing that this is a state that uses these spy tactics and is a hostile, undemocratic, totalitarian, murderous regime. Is it just always the money that talks loudest?
No, not at all. And as you know, Julia, we pulled out the Huawei contract from our 5G networks. And
kicking and screaming.
I don't think that's right at all. Clearly, there's different views in government about these things, but that's exactly what we did, and it was right to do that. And we've taken an ever more cautious approach with China. Of course, we collaborate in certain areas. That's the right thing to do, whether it be particularly international trade, as long as that is fair trade. And I think many of us can see that that's not been the case in the past. So I think we need to be cautious. We need to engage, but be very cautious. One of the things I'm very concerned about from my brief is the calling in of the Chinese super embassy on the Royal Mint site, which it looks like the Chinese Premier President Xi has lent on the Prime Minister, and he's lent on the Prime Minister, and now that application's been called in by Angela Rayner.
And when you say it's called in, basically the local council said we don't want to have your big super embassy in this territory near Tower Hill, near the Tower of London. But basically the government saying when they call it in, it means they can override that.
Responsibility for it, and which doesn't look good. It looks, it's come as a result of direct political influence, which they admitted, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, well, that's the worry, isn't it? Again, there is so much money sloshing around, so much influence economically, and not just military, but economically, that they do have that influence. Talking of trade, let's talk about the EU briefly. The former Brexit chief negotiator, former, obviously, Tory cabinet minister, Lord Frost, has accused Keir Starmer of setting up a surrender squad of 100 civil servants, basically trying to undo Brexit, reset our relationship with the EU. We're all very happy to have trading links with the EU. I thought we'd already got those, but do you think that Keir Starmer, a man who was shadow Brexit secretary, spent 3 years trying to stop the Brexit referendum ever being enacted, do you think he's going to try and take us back into the EU by the back door?
Yes, effectively. I think exactly what he'll do. He's clearly looking at free movement. He's all the time in opposition. He tried to frustrate our attempts to leave the European Union. And then when we'd left, then he tried to make the case for a much closer relationship, which was bound to involve being a member of the single market and customs union, bound to involve free movement of people, bound to involve things like a veterinary agreement, which will ease frictions at the border. There's no doubt about that. But it then locks you out of trade agreements in other parts of the world. We just agreed the CPTPP trade agreement,
this
which
is the Trans-Pacific, yeah.
Trans-Pacific. We're looking at the US. We were looking at the US, the Gulf, India. All these are opportunities. Can I just remind your viewers that 73% of our exports are not goods to the European Union.
Yeah.
They are services. We're the second largest exporter in the world of services, and the goods to the rest of the world. There are huge opportunities with international trade. Europe's one of our markets, an important one, but the US, on a country-by-country basis, is our biggest market. It would make perfect sense to build on those agreements and with many other countries around the world, whose economies are growing more quickly. So there are opportunities there without going cap in hand to the European Union and saying, please, what do you want? And we want this. What do you want? And we know with Starmer and Reeves and Rayner, they are terrible negotiators.
Yeah.
Look at what they did with the train drivers, which you just referenced in your bulletin. I mean, it's just frightening what these people are capable of doing or not capable of doing, which is negotiating a decent agreement. I think the European Union, the European Commission will see him coming, and I think we'll get a terrible deal.
Absolutely run ring around them. Now, you mentioned the economy. Now, this comes to your remit. We've had a lot of announcements in the last week or so from Angela Rayner, your opposite number, Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary, about boosting house building in this country. They've got this target, 1.5 million homes, 300,000 homes a year it works out, although they're saying that they'll be built more towards the end of the Parliament. But then we discovered, and I wrote a piece in The Sun saying, fully support this. We need to build more homes. We've only been, I think, on average, 220,000 a year. Not enough. I don't even think 300,000 a year is enough. But it now emerges, British House Building Federation, all of us saying, look, we haven't actually got anyone to build all these houses. We haven't got the builders, we haven't got the plasterers, the scaffolders, the bricklayers. We haven't got any of these people. Realistically, are we going to, if there is going to be this house building project, assuming the planning changes go through, assuming we actually get some, epic, big mass building projects, do you think we're just going to have to import all those people, or have we got enough homegrown people that we can train up?
Well, if you want to get the builders building, the first thing he should try and do is encourage them to invest. And instead, all we've seen from Labour is taxing the life out of business. And we know that they're less likely to hire as a result, and they're less likely to invest because they've taken £25 billion, they've been hit by £25 billion of business taxation. And we've seen from the house builders that's hit them. And then there's the capacity problems, as you say, in terms of skills. But even worse than all that, Julia, I'm sure you've seen the figures, but this is what I've described as a war on rural England. What they've done, they've cut the targets for house building in Newcastle, in Coventry, in Birmingham, in London, and they've massively increased the targets in rural areas. So Westmoreland up 600%, 600%, a six-fold increase. You're seeing
a seven-fold increase.
It is sevenfold. Okay, great. Oh, well, it's not
100% is double. Sorry, an economist. I'm unlike Rachel Reeves. I can do the numbers.
100% is double there, definitely. I thought the numbers were sixfold, but okay, maybe it's a sevenfold.
600% is sevenfold.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Right. There you go then. But I think it's 500% on that basis.
Okay. Right then.
Another way around. Anyway,
I'm sorry. I threw you there. It's an ongoing complaint of mine that people don't understand these things. But anyway,
I'll make sure I get the numbers right.
No, but can I come in there, because you say, well, this is terrible because they're cutting the numbers in the constituencies which they're more likely to represent because they don't want to upset local people by riding roughshod over people's planning complaints. However, the reality is an awful lot of urban areas are already very, very, very busy places. It's obvious that building in the areas which are not already massively built up would make sense. Your government was going to do it until there was a big outcry from the MPs and the shires. You were going to do exactly the same thing. We need more homes. You guys were happy to import millions more people to this country. They need somewhere to live. People who are born here need somewhere to live. So you're going to have to put homes somewhere. Doesn't it make sense to put them in rural areas, building up the towns there, rather than overcrowding already crowded urban areas?
There's so many questions there. The first one I want to deal with is I was not happy to bring all those people in the UK, and my colleagues weren't either. We were.
They were given visas.
We got things wrong initially, but we've cut. Then we tightened the rules up. Those numbers have started to come down, and will come down a lot further if we were in charge. But in terms of the distribution of the housing delivery, of course, every area should take its fair share. There's no question about it. But that's not what's happening. How can it be right to see a 50% cut in some of the cities across the UK and a six-fold increase across rural areas? How can that be right? On average, urban areas are seeing a 1% increase in targets. The rest of the country, rural areas, a 100% increase.
But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what the increase or the decrease is in the target. It matters the number of homes, doesn't it? What the actual number of homes is that they're going to build. Because actually, it's much harder to build in rural areas than in urban areas, because urban areas have got these brownfield sites where you can pretty much get permission.
No, I think you're misunderstanding what an urban area is. Urban areas they can have urban extensions. They can go into greenfield sites at the edge of cities, the edge of towns, which is the easiest way to do them because you've got services there. You see in rural areas, it's much more difficult to do that. I agree in terms of the expansion of numbers, increasing numbers, and we did that over the last 10 years. The last 10 years we're in office was a record, a decade-long, 50-year record of housing delivery, 207,000 a year in new homes addition. We need more, of course. I agree.
That doesn't touch the size compared to the number of people you imported.
As I said, we need more, and we also wanted to step those numbers up. But we've got to do it in a way that is fair and sustainable. And this is not fair, not deliverable, not sustainable. And it is deliberate. It's a deliberate targeting of seats they do not represent or think they won't represent in the future. I think that's totally wrong. The other thing is, as a centre for cities, you'll say, the reason you put housing in big conurbations is because that's where the jobs are. It makes perfect sense to put them there.
Well, it makes perfect sense until the people who live at the end of the road can't find anywhere to park their car, and they can't get on a bus because there's more and more people, because you don't build the infrastructure to match it.
Of course, you need the infrastructure as well.
There isn't anywhere to do that because you're in the centre of a city.
I don't accept that. Of course, you need to create more roads and more doctors and dental surgery and schools and those kind of things.
But we don't.
Yes, we do. We put £600 billion into transport infrastructure in the last Parliament, Julia. Yes, we do. So, yes, we do.
Yeah, I mean, a load of money spent on HS2 consultants doesn't actually create any extra railways or buses or doctors' surgeries for people. Come on, Kevin.
That was a small fraction of what we spent, actually, in terms of HS2. There's much more spent on regional roads and railways.
I want to get to two other stories now. You, of course, were one of the ministers responsible for the Post Office during this period in which Post Office postmasters and mistresses were trying to get sort of compensation and just get justice for the outrage that they've been through at the hands of the Post Office and the Horizon scandal. You were actually one of the few who actually got the thumbs up from many of those postmasters and postmistresses as someone who got to grips with it, who was working hard, and all credit to you for that. And we've spoken to you about it on the show before. Today is the final day of the inquiry into the Post Office Horizon scandal. Closing statements today. Do you think, it'll probably be many months before we actually get the final inquiry report. Do you think we will finally see sort of justice done, a full account of what has happened, and fingers pointed to people, and at some point criminal action being taken against those who basically committed a horrible wrongdoing against so many innocent men and women?
Well, justice will only be served when all the postmasters have been compensated and somebody has gone to jail for what happened. And I won't name who I think should go to jail, but I've watched the inquiry closely.
Oh, go on.
Well, the accountability has to stop. Has to end with the person at the top of an organisation, and clearly that the evidence that was given by Paula Vanells and others was pretty damning, I think, by her and by the people around her. So, but that's a matter for the police, of course, the Met Police, and for the Crown Prosecution Service. It will take, I think, from what I've read, 1 or 2 years for that to come to pass in terms of prosecutions. But one of the last things I did in office was to write to the Chief Constable to say, a Commissioner of the Met Police to say, what's going on? Will you please hurry up? Yeah,
because that's been going on. I think the first police inquiries were in 2019, weren't they? And we're still, here we are 5 years later, still waiting for any action. Just finally, in terms of police and courts, just finally, Nigel Farage, of course, you'll remember he got a banana milkshake thrown over him while he was campaigning in Clacton-on-Sea ahead of the last general election. The OnlyFans model who sells her body on the internet to any man who will pay to look at her, Victoria Thomas Bowen, she threw the banana milkshake. She actually eventually did plead guilty to assault by beating and also to criminal damage. She has not been given a jail sentence, though. She's been handed a 13-week sentence, suspended for a year. She'll have to do 120 hours of unpaid work. But she's expressed no regret. She has refused to apologise to Nigel Farage. No remorse whatsoever. People who wrote tweets after the Southport attacks have been sent to prison. This woman committed an assault on a Democratic politician during a campaign. Should she have gone to jail?
Well, there's some crazy sentencing going on, as you say. Some people just say something and they get sent to jail, and some people do something and they don't. It seems it's out of kilter to me, and not just in this particular case. And I abhor that kind of behaviour from anybody. And freedom of speech is so important. You might not agree with what Nigel says, but we should all defend his right to say it. So it's difficult to comment on this particular case, but it sounds odd and perverse to me.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Kevin Hollinrake.